Hey, good evening and welcome to Training School. You are going to hear from Dave Stowe, who is our branding expert. Dave is Vice President of Business Development and Marketing for Alphagraphics in Stamford. And he brings about 2 decades of experience to the table. His proactive approach centers around exploring new products and services to integrate with Alphagraphics' already substantial roster of offerings that ensures they serve client needs with more comprehensive and all-inclusive offerings. He's been at the cornerstone of Alphagraphics' work within the political arena as well. He has decades of experience developing and implementing political print, direct mail, and graphics projects. He is an invaluable asset to many campaigns, including quite a number of ours. Dave has been instrumental in fostering support for area nonprofits, both within Alphagraphics, by developing programs that have put the company at the forefront of corporate and social responsibility, as well as outside of Alphagraphics, serving on numerous boards and acting as a nonprofit founder himself. So Dave is going to present to you a program that's in 4 sections. And in between sections will be a great time to take questions. So you can use the chat, you can use the Q&A, or you can use the hand raising emoji if you have any questions. And at the end of each section, I will call on you so that Dave can answer your questions. Anybody have any questions before we start? Okay, hearing none. Dave, the floor is yours.
All right, Joan, thank you very much. Everyone, welcome. I hope this informational session is you find valuable. And as Joan said, there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions. And also at the end, I will share my contact information and you can feel free to contact me at any time. Should you have any questions or just looking for some direction or help in any way, happy to do so. So we're here tonight to talk about branding and integrating that into political campaign. So there's no effective marketing without a defined brand, but in politics, that distinction isn't always clear. One trend in the political space is once a campaign team creates a logo, said logo is considered the candidate's brand and now has the inspiration to design a website, marketing materials that encompass that brand. That's a big mistake. A logo is not the candidate's brand, and a good logo design can certainly convey a candidate's brand, but in and of itself is not the brand. Likewise, adopting a political party's ID as your brand is also a big mistake. In today's political climate, it's imperative that a candidate develop his or her own identity, and every aspect of a campaign should support the overall brand look and feel, as well as a candidate's objective. Brand development requires an in-depth analysis into the overall candidate's goals and objectives, and taking into consideration the candidate's belief, their voice, essence, and differentiators. Once you gain clear perspective about the candidate's brand, then you're ready to tie everything together, unifying the brand using the following components. So we're going to look at 3 kind of component areas, which one is messaging and marketing, the other is digital and traditional channels, and then finally events. So for messaging and marketing, branding your candidate and incorporating these elements into overall campaign positioning is the first step to marketing your candidate. And messaging and marketing must be consistent and true to that brand. For example, is the candidate edgy or steady? Is the candidate disruptive or do they play by the book? Does the look and feel of the digital and print collateral reflect the candidate's brand? More importantly, does it reflect the voters that the candidate is trying to reach and is looking for their support? Effectively using all the available assets and even liabilities is necessary to cohesively communicate your candidate's brand positioning, identity, and brand essence, giving you and your candidate a great advantage. Then once we have that, we move into creating digital and traditional channels of communication. So your candidate's website, digital channels, signs, printed collateral, and direct mail are your campaign's main vehicles to showcase your brand identity, beliefs, and issues. Across each of these channels, your branding needs to be on point. The creative team must live and breathe that brand. They must be willing to learn about the candidate throughout the campaign, and this is paramount to creating clear, engaging messaging and images that will convey what the candidate stands for and who they are. And then we'll take a look at events. So your candidates, one important event, and it doesn't have to be grand, it could be small. Obviously, on a local municipal level, any launch event is not going to be some elaborate event, but it's a great opportunity to introduce yourself and talk to people about who you are. It's an important event, and it should be designed to unveil and showcase your unique brand, and every event thereafter should reflect the brand identity. Whether it's a rally, a door knocking initiative, a town hall, or a donor event, each event and appearance should relay the candidate's brand and personality. If your events are chaotic and lack organization, then your audience might assume that your candidate is the same, damaging that candidate's image and their chances for success. If your events are well orchestrated, have a welcoming team of volunteers distributing information that complement the candidate and their brand, then you're off to a great start. The bottom line is that a campaign consists of many moving parts, and a strong political brand identity not only makes it easier to create compelling content and messaging that complements and reinforces a candidate's brand, but it also creates a solid roadmap for the campaign, driving everything from events and collateral. So before you do anything else in your campaign, make sure you establish and really understand your candidate's brand identity. So if anyone has any questions, now's a good time. Otherwise, we're going to kind of delve into several campaigns that are good examples of branding. So we're good to continue, Joan?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. So first campaign I want to take a look at is President Barack Obama's campaign. And it was extremely innovative and revolutionary. He did an excellent job of branding towards the target demographics he was trying to connect with. He had very nuanced messaging, and he really reimagined traditional colors, which prior to that were very strong red, white, and blue. So he marked the 2008 campaign, pretty much marked a turning point in American political branding. After decades of stagnant designs, the Obama campaign brought us something new and innovative campaign materials. His marketing appealed to young, diverse voters ready for progressive change, and his campaign materials revolutionized political branding in a significant way. One accomplished political brand guru recently said that Obama's logo and key marketing phrases consolidated his brand as a progressive, innovative politician. With warmer shades of red and blue rather than a traditional palette, his messaging furthered notions that optimism and progress were what he was about, with cries of yes, we can, change we can believe in, and hope. And of course, the famous poster by muralist Shepard Fairey became an iconic image of a new generation to young voters. Since the dawn of American politics, our institutions have been built by and for wealthy white men. With Obama, politics became for the first time truly by and for all the people. Everything Obama did reflected his background as a community organizer, and nothing showed his expertise in grassroots activism like his social media strategy. While his competitors bought TV and radio airtime and spoke to middle ground voters, Obama prioritized some less traditional platforms and spoke directly to voter base who had been long ignored by mainstream politics. The result of this strategy was that he mobilized thousands of voters who usually don't show up at the polls. Ultimately, President Obama's efforts to stand up paid off. 2008 saw the most diverse voter turnout in U.S. history, as a record number of Black, Hispanic, and Asian voters cast their ballots for him. Obama also drew 2/3 of the under 30 crowd, reaping the success of his innovative strategy. Now, the next one we want to take a look at is someone that we all not so much love, but the one good thing I can say about Donald Trump is that he is an excellent marketing person. Not very good at anything else, but marketing, he definitely knows what he's doing. So as the pendulum swings, Trump 2016 run for president harkened back to traditional designs and values of the 80s, reflecting the more conservative strongman politics of that era. However, unlike his predecessors, Trump took his branding to the internet. Trump's logo and messaging appeal to conservative values. Big, bold letters in red, white, and blue project American strength, and simple messaging is easy to understand at a glance. A politician known for bucking diplomacy, the lack of nuance in his materials is the design and is intentional, and it's completely on brand for him. The real key to his marketing, though, are his slogan and hat, "Make America Great Again." It drips of patriotism, and is genius in its ability to imply white nationalism without actually saying those words. It echoes and validates the beliefs of his voter base. Trump's brand is the antagonist, and his home base was Twitter. Throughout 2016, he crafted increasingly shocking tweets that resonated and built rapport with his voter base. He mobilized older rural voters to turn out in high numbers. True to his brand, his ads were blatantly antagonistic towards other candidates, particularly Hillary Clinton. Trump found a niche of voters whose voices were underrepresented in American politics, and he built a brand that spoke directly to their frustrations. Whether or not he actually was going to solve problems was irrelevant, but they felt listened to. More than 60% of his 2016 turnout was composed of white Americans without college education. And that, as you remember, is exactly who he was speaking to when he was at rallies and with his campaign materials. He carefully honed his image of the American strongman to appeal to his voter base and succeeded just enough to win office. While Trump is undeniably a pretty awful human being and a destructive force in politics, our concern here is with his branding genius, which is undeniable and the only time Trump will be confused with a genius. So next, I'd like to move on to the AOC campaign. And she kind of picked up and worked outside of conventional politics. The same rules of branding still apply here. So take her novel approach to branding in her 2018 run for the House of Representatives. For AOC, her poster became her brand. Rather than spread her branding and budget across multiple materials, she focused on a single image that clearly represents her politics and speaks to progressive voters in her district. There's a lot to dissect here. So the bold colors that mirror her politics, the sheer text angle angle towards forward towards the future, on the speech bubble that represent her conversational approach. She is the face of her own campaign. Her gaze follows the text with the same progressive path forward. By putting her face front and center, she visually represents her district's changing demographics. As an inexperienced politician, visibility was the key to her success. Every design detail serves to create a cohesive message that amplifies her bare bones slogan, "Vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." Like her politics, her slogan is direct and action-oriented. The bilingual text pays homage to her Puerto Rican heritage and connects with the many Spanish speakers in her district. And exclamation points accentuated with stars make multiculturalism patriotic. The look has been copied to the point where it is a stand-in for progressive politics now in branding and marketing. Social media is a huge part of her brand. Her platforms highlight authentic and relatable parts of her campaign, which appeals to her base of young voters. She's savvy about her use of Instagram stories and posts to get information out. Many of them. Basically, she uses social media like every other influencer under 35, prioritizing transparency and clickable content. So she was the first candidate to openly include Latinx community in her campaign materials, even in a district where 40% of the population speaks Spanish. Like Obama and Trump, she found niche of voters who had been excluded by previous politicians and found a way to speak directly to their experiences. In this case, quite literally. Also, like Trump, she didn't win a popular vote landslide. Only 13.9% of registered Democrats in her district turned out to vote, but she knew the right messaging would compel enough people to cast a ballot. So now, while all of these are national campaigns, what I wanted to do is kind of wrap it up and point you towards a really successful local campaign that just took place this last election cycle. So Jennifer Leeper ran for state rep in Fairfield, and she's now serving Fairfield in Hartford. So the branding for the three national campaigns we took a look at were very high profile, well-financed national campaigns. Local municipal elections certainly do not have the budgets that these races have, but the roadmap to good branding and successful campaigns are still the same. Let's take a look at Jennifer Leeper's race. And she had previously lost to her opponent in a special election the year before, but she came back this past November and won and is now representing Fairfield. Her branding and campaign are an excellent example of what you can do with a smaller local budget, yet still get it right. So Jen started with two things. First is that she made the campaign about what was important to her and to the people that she was trying to reach. And the second was an excellent branding and logo. If we look at her logo, she continues with the AOC example of using non-traditional colors. and that stand out from the crowd, but ones that work and are carried through all of her branding materials. Her logo is also localized and appealing to local voters. She used the iconic Penfield Lighthouse in her logo. And so she's speaking very locally, and opposed to national or regional politics, it's really easy to brand yourself in a way that speaks directly to the people, because you're dealing generally with one town, and you should know that town very well and know what is important to the people there and what they react to and respond to. So if we look at her logo, it also has a subtle piece of imagery in it with that lighthouse, and it brands her campaign as a beacon of light leading people forward. Her message throughout all of her materials was also positive and spoke to her expertise in education and that experience and how she was going to put that experience to work for the people of Fairfield. All of these things were a true reflection of her personality and not something fabricated. That's also important to recognize when you're branding a candidate. You do not want to brand the candidate as who you think people want them to be, because that is very easily seen through. The branding needs to be genuine and really reflect who that person is. Another thing is that she did not go negative in any way and barely, if ever, mentioned her opponent. She also did a good job of defining herself so that her opponent could not. She played up responsibility in a time of public health crisis, modeled responsible behaviors, and also made sure to show a smiling face in all of her materials. And if you've ever met Jen, that's exactly who she is. It's not a put on, and it's not trying to be somebody who she's not. She also did an excellent job of speaking to the audience that would be crucial to her winning, basically seniors and families, and continuously stressed education, healthcare, and public safety. She also maximized her budget with good planning by having a mail plan, along with having an idea of all the materials she wanted to produce ahead of time, which allowed her to put a budget together and also put planning and scheduling together for everything. So now we'll kind of, I don't know, Joan, are we good to continue? Anybody have any questions of what we kind of just covered?
I'm not seeing any questions. Anybody have any questions before we move on? This is great information, Dave. Okay, not seeing any questions.
Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll take an overview look at campaign materials, what the component parts are and how you put them together. So when putting together a campaign, having a good understanding of what campaign materials you're going to need and how that fits into your budget is vital. You should look into figuring out who you're going to work with and rely on well ahead of time as well. A campaign should not be figuring out who their partners and vendors are going into September. Clear, consistent, and easy to understanding messaging that speaks directly to your voters should also always be the goal and is paramount when designing things. There are also many tools that a campaign can harness to get their message across, and those include digital channels, campaign literature, signs, direct mail, and any other vehicle that will allow them to gain visibility in front of their potential voters. So just a couple notes here too, and we'll cover budget shortly, but you definitely want to be, this is planning and organization is crucial here. You want to make a list of all the different kinds of elements, whether they be digital or traditional, of what you think you want to include and use in your campaign, prioritize them, and that'll really help you in building your budget. So now let's take a look at budgeting. So you need to know what money you have available for the campaign. And that could be a moving target too, as you continue to fundraise. But usually, sometimes it's matching grants from the state, or sometimes you have to do the fundraising all on your own. It really depends on the campaign and who's running. So in doing so, when putting your budget together, do not overestimate what your fundraising is going to be. If anything, be conservative and be realistic. If you find that you have a little extra money in the budget as election day approaches, as the result of you being conservative and prudent, you can always put that into extra GOTV efforts and really boost your get out the vote efforts. So once you have a good idea of what your budget number is going to be, then you go about dividing up that for the various costs that you will have, which can include fundraising costs, website and design, social media, graphic design, direct mail, signs, other printed collateral, and anything else that you might want to include in your campaign. Then make a list of all these items that you think you would like to have, and get pricing on those. When it comes to costs for design, printed materials, direct mail, signs, and related items, make sure you talk with a source that knows what they are doing and that you can trust. You also want to communicate with those people about what your plans as best you can, what your plans are going to be as best you can as to what materials you think you're going to need and would like to produce. Pricing out a sign and then a palm card and then a mailer is not what you want to do. You want to use economies of scale when getting your budget together. So a vendor is far more likely to give you better pricing when you tell them that you were looking at 5 or 6 different items as opposed to producing one-off items and getting pricing like that. It's also important when choosing who to work with that you go with someone you can trust. So locally, the best way to go about that would be word of mouth, and specifically talk to people who have already run for office and see what experiences they've had with partners and vendors that they've used. And then get drilling down a little more when it comes to who to work with. Perhaps the most important logistical decision that you might make in your campaign is deciding who to work with for your election materials. All vendors are not created equal. You want someone who has experience in the campaign space. You want someone that you can trust and who does quality work. Don't be afraid to ask to see samples of previous election work that they've done. Also, if you're dealing with someone in one space that is going to do the design as well, ask to see some design so you can see if you like what their creativity is like. And if you don't like that, you could always work with a graphic designer and then continue to work with that vendor on all the materials that you're going to produce. You also want someone who communicates well and who you are comfortable with. The most valuable thing that you have is your time, and lost time for mistakes on campaign materials, or you wasting time going back and forth, is a painful and frustrating process. So you want to look to avoid that. Plus, as you go deeper into campaign, you're going to have less and less time. And the last thing you want to deal with is trying to figure out when my palm card is going to be ready or when that next mail piece is going to be dropped in the mail. Also, aside from the obvious time savings and simplicity that this approach offers, you will have a number of other benefits. One is brand integrity and consistency. If you have everything generated and created in one place, then all the materials are going to look the same. The colors will be consistent, and that will speak to who you are as well. And all of the materials will be consistent and they match. You're also trying to tell a story and make a good and lasting impression on people. And nothing does that better than clean, clear, quality materials. You'll also save money if you work with one vendor who is handling everything. During election season, time is of the essence, and you want your materials in hand within a few days once you approve them. And you want mail pieces printed, addressed, and in the mail within a day or two from approval. Everything moves really fast in a campaign, and time is of the essence. Hidden cost or cost savings is, and another thing is with postage. And every vendor does not have the same skill and experience when it comes to processing mailing lists and maximizing postage. Not really going to go into much detail with direct mail because there's just simply so much to know and so much to do. I'm actually doing a standalone informational session in 2 weeks on direct mail and other integrated services relating to direct mail. One last consideration is whether or not to use a union shop, and that really depends on your district. In my shop, we have the ability to produce both union and non-union work, but I always recommend to any of the political clients we're working with that unless using union label materials serves a compelling purpose in your district, I would avoid it. The reason is union materials tend to cost on balance about 20% more. So if you don't have a high a high percentage of the population that are your voters that are in unions, or there's a big business that employs many thousands of people in your district or in the town you're working in, I would avoid using union labor just because of the cost savings. And with tight budgets on smaller campaigns, that's going to allow you to make your budget go a lot further and produce a lot more items for the same amount of money. So any other questions now, Joan, or should we just keep plowing through?
Not seeing any questions.
Okay. So now we can get into the nitty gritty of actual.
1 second, we do have a question.
Oh, okay. Go right ahead.
We have a question. What percentage of the budget for print materials do you recommend?
So that's really kind of an open-ended question. Because one, it depends on what your budget is, and what the mandatory things are that you know you have to do. So I would say that any campaign absolutely should have a website, even if it's just a single page. That should be a priority. Um, Getting your design together and creating a, graphic design to build your brand, come up with your logo and kind of the look and feel of your campaign. That's another expense that I would prioritize and something that you have to do. Uh, and then the reality is that's also why when I spoke earlier about building your budget, that's why it's really good idea to put together an entire list of all the things that you think you're going to do, prioritize them, price them out, and then really then what you can do is look at your campaign, because every campaign is unique, and also knowing who your voters are and kind of trying to figure out what avenues of communication they're most receptive to also goes a long way to planning out how much for print, how much for digital. Um, and along those lines too, you have to look at, do you plan on doing a lot of door knocking? If so, you want to make sure you have an appropriate number of handouts, whether they be door hangers or palm cards or questionnaires. So it's really an open-ended question. That's also why kind of working with somebody that knows what they're doing and that has experience can really help point you in the right direction. So sorry, I can't be more specific, but the reality is every campaign is unique. So every way you allocate the budget is unique. But that's why kind of laying out these steps and following this process will really help you decide what percentage by, you prioritizing what you really think is important in the campaign, and speaking with someone who has experience and can let you know, well, yeah, cutting that much probably isn't a great idea, but you don't need, you can get away with this number of materials and then put the rest of your budget towards digital or towards events. So now as we talk specifically about campaign literature,
I have
there's,
one more question,
oh,
Dave.
go ahead.
And thank you for that answer, by the way.
Sure.
Next question is, who are the businesses in the region who are doing strong political design and promotional work?
So, well, I would certainly say our company is, we've been doing, we worked on hundreds of campaigns over the last 20 years, and we have a lot of experience in that. Um, I would say Ashley Gaudiano, who had previously run for state rep in Trumbull and in Fairfield. She's the one who did the design on Jennifer Leeper's piece. And she did an excellent job with that. I've also worked with her on numerous other campaigns, and her work is always, one, she's super organized. Her design is really, really well done. Her files are always prepared properly, so when she forwards them to myself or another printer, there's no time lost there. I would also say I work with a number of independent graphic designers. One is Amy Fink of AF Design. She has a lot of experience for at least 10, 15 years designing political collateral. And there are some others, but again, I have my contact information at the end. And if you're looking for more information on that, I'd be happy to share, some more outlets for you as well. Just feel free to reach out. So now as we get into actual campaign literature is one of the most important tools that a candidate has to communicate to potential voters. This is even more so on the local level, where TV and radio is generally not in the budget. As a result, you want to make sure that you make the best use of the tools available to you. This is about all the ways that you are going to interact with voters, and then how you can brand yourself and communicate in all of those circumstances. So starting with direct mail, it's an extremely powerful tool that is one of the most effective ways to reach voters and is a trusted source of information about a candidate. People actually in polls consistently say that direct mail is the most reliable source of information on a candidate as opposed to any other informational channels. There's an incredible amount to know about direct mail, so we'll not go into really detail about it here, other than to say use direct mail in your campaigns and make sure that you have a mail plan ahead of time. If you'd like to learn more in detail on direct mail and integrating direct mail with digital channels, I'll be doing an entire session on that in 2 weeks on the 25th. So much of a contact that a local candidate will have with voters is often through door knocking. There are a number of printed pieces that are important for this. Having a palm card to hand out that is well branded and illustrates what the candidate stands for is important to have. Having a leave behind for those who are not home is also a good idea. Additionally, having a card for people to fill out and return with questions and ideas is a nice touch. It's always really good, and you can do it very well on the local level because your voter base is not that large. See what's important to people. Ask them, take their questions, and then be responsive to that. And that'll go a long way to generating votes and building consensus among the voters in your community. It's also not a bad idea to be wearing a lapel campaign sticker and have those to hand out. Door hangers are also a good way to leave for leave behinds, and can incorporate elements of the palm card and suggestion cards into the door hanger. Just also one note on having lapel stickers. That's also, not only is it you're giving somebody something, but if you give that to someone and they start wearing that around, they're endorsing you, and that's putting your brand out there to more people. So the more ways that you can have your logo and your name out there, the better. Especially on local campaigns, name recognition is so important. If somebody's never heard of you, they're not going to vote for you. So the more you can blast your name and your logo in front of them, the better it is. Because very often people will go into a voting booth and not really know the candidates that well, but they might vote simply party line, or they might vote, oh, you know what? I know that person. I like that person, and they'll vote for them. Also, branded campaign stationery is a good idea and allows for personal notes and other correspondence. Fundraising letters are also a good idea to have on branded letterhead and to put in branded envelopes. Now let's move on to some other items. First one is signs, and signs are really an invaluable tool. I can't say that enough. They are a gift that really just keeps on giving. One of the most important things in politics and at the ballot box, as I mentioned, is name recognition. This is in part why incumbents fare so well, because people know who they are. People often will fail to truly research what candidates stand for, but they are often comfortable voting for someone who they know and who they recognize, or at least know their name. Politics is like marketing, and in marketing, it is a well-known fact that it often takes 8 to 12 touches before someone takes a desired action or does what you're looking for them to do. Signs are a great way to keep getting a candidate in front of people over and over. That lawn sign or that banner that people drive by every day for a month go a long way to building acceptance and recognition. They also help to build trust. The more neighbors that have a lawn sign on their lawn for a candidate, the more likely someone is to be comfortable with that candidate. And the same is true with posters and rally signs. Another great way to take another great way to take branding with a candidate wherever they go with minimal investment is with a branded banner stand. Those, if you're familiar with them, are retractable banner stands. They literally just fold up into a base. You pull it out, there's a pole that goes behind it, and all of a sudden you have a 6-foot billboard with you. They're easy to set up, easy to break down, and you can carry them all around with you. It allows for mobile branding at events, town halls, and other opportunities for the candidate to speak and have their brand seen. If you're doing virtual events too, you can simply put that behind you, and then you have your brand out there for everyone to see. Also, like a banner stand is about $200, and they can get done really quickly. So it's an inexpensive way to really have a mobile brand with you. Banners are also fairly inexpensive. They are large and they're very easily seen. And if you have opportunities for high profile placement for banners or oversized signs, take advantage of it. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with Route 25, that goes through Newtown and Monroe and down into Bridgeport. During election season, that road is absolutely covered in signs, and there's lots of traffic that go up and down there. So you want to look for high traffic areas where you're allowed to put signs and really, claim those spaces and get your signs out there. Another great tool is magnets. Large magnets that you can put on the car of the candidate and campaign members are an inexpensive way to have a rolling billboard and spread the brand everywhere you go. You can also make small car magnets to give or sell to your supporters in order, in turn, also become rolling billboards for you. Other promotional materials, if the budget allows, are also a great way to build your brand and involve and reward supporters. Branded stickers, pens, buttons, and other collateral material can be helpful items to employ. And that pretty much covers most of the material, but I'm happy to take any questions and go into more detail with anything that we covered or anything that we didn't cover.
We do have a question.
Okay.
Have you seen a unique material or addition that was striking and effective, whether traditional swag or interesting cuts?
Interesting cuts. I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I'm not.
Yeah,
clear.
that's what the question says. Not sure if she means an interesting shape.
Oh, okay. Die cuts. Can you just repeat that again?
Have you seen a unique material or addition that was striking and effective, whether traditional swag or interesting cuts? And by that, she means like oddly shaped printed material.
Okay. So when it comes to actual materials, there's just a plethora of materials that you can use, but we want to make sure that they're appropriate for the use that you're using them for. So if we're talking about like printed collateral materials like palm cards or direct mail, things like that, you're limited to certain materials. However, every different cover stock or every different paper stock has a different feel, a different texture to it. So what I would say is what we often do with like direct mail pieces is we'll put an aqueous coating on them, satin aqueous coating. And what that does, it's almost like pleasing to have it in your hands with the texture that it is, as opposed to just an uncoated sheet or even a high gloss sheet. But whether you use like a gloss finish or a satin finish, that's also can be a personal preference. We tend to lean towards a more satin finish. We think it's a little more appealing. It's also less distracting when reading the materials because there's no glare coming off it. As far as die cut, we've done die cut like palm cards and things like that. They certainly do stand out from the crowd. One other thing to consider is not only like the shape and the material, but especially with direct mail, is the size of the piece. Something that might be atypical from every other postcard that someone's getting in the mail that stands out is then more likely for them to hold it in their hand and interact with it and take some action, hopefully visiting your website. Well, that's also one other thing. One thing that all your campaign materials should do is drive everyone to one central point, and that should be the homepage of your website. You should always have your web address on any of your printed materials. Lawn signs, if you can, should incorporate your web address as well. You're trying to drive everyone back to what's going to be your central hub for information. Also, so when it comes to other materials, when it comes to signage, you have a much wider ability to really use some diverse materials. So for instance, like magnets, you can die cut magnets in any shape you want. And if you're using them either, handing them out to people, that will bring more attention to a magnet on the back of a car. Same thing on your car. Also, in lieu of magnets, you can also use adhesive vinyl that you can put on any wall surface, any car surface. That's a really versatile thing. You can use actually, for instance, at campaign headquarters, you can put window vinyl up, and that can be die cut into any shape you want. When it comes to specific swag materials, what I would say on the local level, it's hard to get too crazy and innovative because budgets are pretty restrictive. We've done some really nice things that have stood out, whether they're handouts. A lot of times what you can really do is for donors having a nice return gift, whether it be coffee mugs that have your campaign on it or something along those lines. But also when it comes to promotional materials, there's literally a library of hundreds of thousands of products. So that's another thing. If you wanted some innovative products when you were starting your campaign, the best thing to do would kind of be review that with somebody like myself or anyone else that deals in campaign materials and can literally show you, many, many, many different options. Because what I might think is appealing, you might think is, yeah, why would anyone want that? And then say, but I'd rather have something like this. So again, that's also why it's important to, get with someone that you trust and that you're comfortable working with.
Are QR codes outdated?
Actually, no. So in general, there was kind of a rush to use them, years ago, but we've used them actually in several mailings within the past week, and they're really functional if you use them for the right purpose. So for instance, we just did a mailing that went in the mail today for Lock City Brewing, which is a great brewery down in Stamford. If you like beer and haven't heard of them, check them out. But they wanted to hit a very specific neighborhood in Stamford because they're launching a beer delivery program where they'll actually deliver to your home. So what we did is not only did we put all that information on there, but we put a QR code that perforated out of the postcard with a QR code on it that takes somebody directly to their order page. That way it makes it as convenient as possible for somebody to get there. They don't have to enter the web address. They don't have to fumble around looking for anything. They just tear the postcard out. I mean, the business card out. They can put it on their refrigerator or put it someplace handy. And then it takes them right to that page. So you're saving somebody time. You know, for a political campaign, a great thing to do would be to put a QR code that just takes someone to your website or to a landing page, or maybe if you're promoting a specific event, takes them to the event page. So I would say they're definitely not outdated. I would not overuse them, but for very specific purposes, they can be really helpful and help you build traffic and buy-in from your audience.
Any other questions? Last call for questions. Dave, this was so helpful and so interesting. We have a question.
Okay.
What are some other branding examples?
Some other branding examples. Can you be more specific? Are you talking about like things that you can use for branding, such as whether it be a business card or a sign, or examples of good branding? I mean, what specifically are you thinking or are you asking about?
Or an example of questions you ask to help someone determine their brand.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So, well, so there could be a couple things, and we're talking now specifically about local municipal elections. So knowing your community is important. So I would say, you know, are there, when it comes to imagery, are there any iconic, important things in the town or in the district that you can incorporate into your branding, just like Jen Leeper did with the lighthouse, which people that live in Fairfield, you know, everybody knows what that is for the most part. And that also, because of the rays of light coming out of the lighthouse, is a very positive and uplifting message. Also, the use of color. Color that either speaks to you or speaks to the people you're trying to communicate, or additionally, if your town has certain colors that stand out. Don't be afraid to use like bold colors. Don't be afraid to use colors that are different. Don't simply get stuck in the rut of red, white, and blue. While that works, it also is going to blend in with everything else, and it's not going to stand out. So if you have some other colors that are different, that jump, somebody's eye is going to go to that, and they're going to then pick up that mail piece and look at it a little longer, or you know, they'll look at that sign amongst a crowd of other signs. Other good things for branding is, as I mentioned earlier, is your branding should be a reflection of the candidate. You know, so if you're using, you know, images of the candidate in your collateral materials and in your digital materials, you know, don't try and make that person someone, you know, out to be someone they're not. Because also on the local level, you tend to have a lot more voter interaction, and people will, you know, learn very quickly that who you are, if it's different from who you're trying to say you are, and that would be a bad reflection on the campaign. But also knowing who your target demographics are and whose votes you're trying to turn out is really important, because in your branding, you want to speak to who your target audience is. You know, if you're running a Democrat campaign, you'll probably get a few Republicans to vote for you, but primarily your voter pool is going to be independents and Democrats, and getting a good feel for what's important, especially if it's in a community, is really, really important to know. So potentially going on town education boards, town boards where people share issues in the town, and knowing what those are and then incorporating that into your brand is a really good way to go.
Okay, another question. How do you convince a candidate to use bolder design? Most materials are still red, white, and blue and pretty conservative.
So, well, two things. I would say it's easier to do that on the Democrat side, where, you know, usually the red, white, and blue and kind of boring is more traditionally conservative, where more progressives are more open to, vivid colors or something that's different. I think also the way to go about that might be to do some mock-ups of, what you're thinking for a particular material or for the logo, show it to them in a traditional, color and maybe drab fonts and something that's not as what you would consider interesting. And then do another mock-up that uses more vivid colors, that brings in some more, imagery, that brings in some different and more interesting fonts. That's a good way to go about it. And also potentially showing those ideas to some people in your circle and just getting some feedback. Because I think hearing from other people about that and what they think, and if they really like something that's different, will help convince the candidate that that's the right way to go. But taking some chances and standing out from the crowd in politics is never a bad thing. Blending in doesn't really get you noticed.
Any other questions? Looks like that's it.
Okay, so yeah, my contact information's up here. So if anybody thinks of any other questions or would like to be pointed in the direction of a resource or a vendor of anything, I'm happy to do it. So feel free to reach out. You can email me. You can call the office. And like I said, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I have a wealth of experience that I'm always happy to share with everyone.
Dave, thank you so much. I think this was really, really informative. And
Yep.
thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Any last questions before we go? All right. Thank you so much, Dave.
All right, thank you, Joan.
Take care.
All right, have a good night, everyone.